Welcome to the City of Tybee Island podcast. I'm your host and Tybee Island City Manager, Shawn Gillen. On the podcast, we'll bring you the latest updates and information about our beautiful coastal community. Hey, welcome again to Coastal Conversations at City of Tybee Island podcast. I'm Shawn Gillen, the City Manager on Tybee Island. This is Jen Amerell, our Finance Director for City of Tybee Island. It is budget season.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the budget process here on Tybee, and it's in cities in general, but really specific to Tybee Island, and our fiscal year ends June 30th. So by June 30th, we have to have, by law, a new budget passed. So that doesn't begin in June. It begins much further before that. So Jen, tell us a little bit about when your process started.
Well, my process starts really January 1st, but the whole budget process starts a year before that. So we're looking at June, July of 2022, when the council starts to have their original meetings and they start talking about goals and projections and wish lists. Excuse me. And so, that's really when it starts, and that's compiling all that information of meeting after meeting after meeting that y'all have, and then we're compiling that starting in January. Right in February is when we get the department heads involved with their wish lists, which is always fun to see when those come rolling in. And then we're gonna roll out with the council in the next upcoming weeks, and hours and hours and hours going page by page.
So as you referred to, the strategic planning sessions for the council started in January with a workshop at the Shrine Club, and we had a facilitated workshop. We had several of those from January, February, March, and then I think we have one coming up here in April, but it's a budget workshop. We called them budget workshops, but they were strategic planning workshops. It's all the same because we build the budget around those strategic goals. So we put those in the budget as part of the budget document. So we say, here's what we want to accomplish. Here's where the money is going to try to accomplish that. So one of the things that is interesting is the number of meetings that we have to have coming up. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's kind of technical, but it's the rules of Georgia show we have to have a certain number of budget hearings. Budget isn't actually an ordinance that gets passed. Yes. It's a law that has 2 readings, that sort of thing. So walk us through what's coming up from the end of April, which we have a budget workshop next week on the 26th.
Yes.
What comes up after that?
Well, we have, like you said, the first budget workshop next week, and that's really just an introduction and overview of the entire budget, and then we'll get really into the details going page by page, like I said, with the departments. I'm guessing we are not going to finish that all in one sitting. That would be a record. So we'll have a second budget workshop, and that's, again, just talking through things, and that's that's really just, we're going to have a very informal conversation about things. Georgia law states we have to have 2 at least, so we'll have the public hearings in May, which will be at a formal council meeting, and that's when, residents can come up, voice their opinion on how great the budget is, how much they love the pictures and the graphs in there, compliment me on my hard work, and then we'll officially adopt it at the end of June.
And they usually like the taxes. That's their favorite part.
Yes.
To talk about. No.
We do a good job of keeping the taxes relatively stable.
We do. For the residents of Tybee Island, it is the goal of the budget, number one, is to meet the needs. And so one of the things in the draft budget that we put together was we have to budget for a population of 30,000 people because we have 3,100 year-round residents according to the U.S. Census. But at any given time, we have 30 to 50,000 people on the island.
Yeah.
And we have to have enough police officers, firefighters, DPW workers to keep the residents safe from that group, that huge number of visitors that come across the island. So that's an ongoing challenge.
It is.
So there's a couple things about budget processes and municipal budgeting that I think we can talk to help people learn some of the lingo that they're going to hear. One is the word fund. In government, that means something very specific. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what a government fund is?
Sure. How much time do we have?
Very good. Three and a half hours.
A local municipality can have one fund if it's very small, multiple funds. Tybee has multiple. We have the general fund. That's our main fund. And that is where the operations of the city go. So parking revenue, room taxes, you have your public works, you have your police, your fire, again, the general operations. We have other funds, the water utility, the water sewer utility, that's a separate fund. So basically all the accounting, all the activity is totally kept separate from the general fund. Our campground, that's another significant fund that is separate from the general fund, and that's all the activities of the campground go in there. Then we have a bunch of other smaller funds, capital funds. All of our capital purchases go into one fund. We have SPLOS, which is a separate fund. And really what funds are is you can think of it as separate little businesses, I think, for an organization. So we have multiple different businesses that each have different type of accounting rules. They have different cash investment accounts that we have to account for, as well as the fund balance. And that's really where the money, the savings account for each of those individual funds is at.
Correct. So so when we use the word funds in government, we don't mean money.
Correct.
We have a specific definition of it as it's an entity. It is a place where money goes from a specific source. It's
Correct.
kind of in essence of what it does, right? So a governmental fund has all the taxes and parking revenue and hotel motel tax. All those general taxation comes in. They can be used for a variety of things. It has a set of accounting rules.
Yes.
But the enterprise fund, as you were saying, the water and sewer fund is more like it has a whole different set of accounting rules based on the type of revenue that comes into it, the type of fund that you set up. And
Correct.
All these funds then get audited at the end of the year by a third party. We just hired a new auditing firm.
Yes,
we'll talk about that in just a second. So that's one of the things we kick around. We don't want to confuse terms. You can't interchange the word funds with dollars in government because it gets confusing. I have a brother that's a CPA in the private sector, and when I put him and say, "Hey, let's talk about fund accounting sometime," he's like, "No, thank you. I have no idea how that works," because they do it completely differently in the private sector than it is in the public sector, and that's something that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yes.
Okay, so the audit is another part of so the process of the budget starts with strategic planning. You're planning the budget. You're developing the budget right now, and then they'll implement the budget once they vote on it to pass it in June.
Yes.
Then we'll implement the budget.
Yes.
And then we'll review the budget. And so the review process is basically an audit.
Yes.
Well, internally we review KPIs and goals and things like that, but the audit comes back and makes sure that we followed all the rules, right?
Correct.
So when does that start?
Oh boy. They start preliminary work before even the fiscal end, and really what that is they come in and they look at our internal controls. And that is each organization should have a set of internal controls. The smaller you are, the less internal controls or segregation of duties that you can have. The larger organization, like us, we're able to implement that, and that's basically like someone who does the bank reconciliation is separate from someone who does the review. So they'll start that, geez, I can't believe I'm going to say it, but in a few months. And then they really get into the nitty-gritty of it in the fall once we're able to close our books. Here in Georgia, we have like a delay from when we're able to close our books just because of when taxes come in.
Right.
So the brunt of that is going to be in the fall, and that's it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks of them, going through the financials, making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. There isn't anything like significant or material that they have to adjust. Knock on wood. And then we get the audit report usually by the end of December, 6 months after year end.
Great. And so that is something every government entity has to do to
Yes.
maintain its certification with the state as a certified city or
You just have to. It's one of those things.
And one of the things you selected a new firm, and one of the things that you talked to me about was this firm has a lot of experience with federal grants.
Yes.
We've been very, very fortunate, and a lot of staff time and effort has gone into acquiring grants. And I think if we land the next one, it's going to put us right around $20 million over the last 5 years. So it's 4 to 5 million per year of grant dollars that we're taking in. We've really ramped that up a lot. So one of the things we have to be aware of is the federal rules have their own set of rules, and there might be some state funding, and these are coming from different agencies. And then there's a thing called a single audit.
Yes.
Which if you get federal grants, you got to get. We won't dig into that because it gets a little dry.
Everyone's sleeping already.
So, but at any one time, we're planning a budget, we're implementing a budget, and we're reviewing a budget, typically at the same time. That's why your department is so important to the city's functioning, is that you're handling not only the transactions that are happening in the implementation of the budget, but the review of the budget. So before we wrap up, before we do, I want to talk to you about the goal that we had when we first brought you on board, was getting that GFOA award for financial reporting. There's two awards that we're looking at. One for budgeting, and the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, has these awards for government budgeting and for financial report. So the audit is just the audit. We're looking at going to the next level on that, and it's called a what now? It used to be called a CAFR.
It's the ACE, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report.
Where it was the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Yes,
they changed the name for some reason. I don't know
Job
why.
security.
There you go. They had to redo all the letterhead. So the CAFR or the AC FR or whatever they call it now, it was so easy to just say CAFR it rolls right off the tongue. But that is a kind of a next step above an audit. It has a bunch of additional statistical information that would then qualify us for this financial reporting award, which is something we should be getting every single year afterwards, because it means that we're doing something. So that is something you're working on.
Yes.
It's a ton of work, I know. I appreciate that.
It is. The biggest time consumer is you have to have 10 years of data.
Right.
Who keeps 10 years of data?
Like, who's the largest taxpayer?
Yes, who's the largest water usage?
Correct. So nailing that all down, and really the only people that ever use these CAFRs or ACRFs,
nerdy accountants,
are nerdy accountants and bond issuers. So if the city were to issue debt in the form of a bond, the bond company, Moody's or Standards & Poor's, would call us up, and they'd be looking at that CAFR, and they're looking at all that statistical data, because to them it means something.
Yes.
I'm not sure what, but I do know it is a lot of meaningful information in there that's interesting. But it's hard, it's hard to get a grasp on the city's financial situation based on balance sheets and things like that, because our assets aren't liquid.
Correct.
You can't just go out and sell off the streets and the pipes. It's just something. So it's an interesting world that you guys live in. So
I love it.
I wrote a dissertation on it. So that was I won't bore you even with the title.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But anyway, so thank you. So a lot of meetings coming up, lots of opportunities for people to come and talk to us about the budget.
Absolutely.
The budget's going to be in two pieces, or it's going to be the operating budget and the capital budget. And we've done a lot of things differently on capital planning. And I think something to note in this upcoming budget is a little bit bigger than last year's budget, about $1.5 million larger or something wrong.
1.3.
1.3. Most of that's going to salaries.
Correct.
Because we're trying to remain competitive with your cities around us who are just increasing their pay. And then we've, of course, got 10 to 12,000 new jobs coming to the region.
Yes.
That's going to start being a competition for that same labor pool. The other thing is that we're really being aggressive in infrastructure, which we have been doing for the last 2 to 3 to 4 years, is putting, number one, about $2 to $3 million in water and sewer infrastructure every year. And then maintaining all the other capital. We're putting $500,000 in paving every year, and then building maintenance, things like that, just taking care of what we have. So that is in the budget. Those were goals and objectives of the city council. That's what they said they wanted to achieve, so that's what we're doing.
That's huge.
There's going to be opportunities to come and talk and ask us all questions. Last couple of years, I've done a Zoom session, which we'll be doing again this year in the evening, sometime between now and the end of May. And we don't get a lot of participation at those.
I wonder why.
It's not exciting, but
we got to advertise better. That's what it is.
Well, we do want to make sure we have that opportunity, that people will be able to come in person, to be able to come on Zoom. Here's the budget. We'll walk through, look at the highlights, and then people can talk about it, and we can record it. And put it up on our YouTube, so if people want to come, they can watch it, at their leisure.
Absolutely. And I always welcome questions. I mean,
Yeah.
governmental accounting and fund accounting, like you speak of, is so
Right.
different than the day-to-day. And so there's always a lot of misunderstanding and misconception. So I welcome questions. I'm not as nerdy as you are when it comes to it, but I do like talking about it a lot. So
That's my thing. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Jen. You're doing a great job. We really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being here, and the time and effort it took to get this document put together does not go unappreciated. How about that? I know I appreciate it. I know the residents do. So thank you very much. And that's it for today. And we'll see you
All right.
next time on Coastal Conversations.